Hey everyone, this is Melina.
This is Arielle.
Welcome back to our podcast slash I guess now YouTube
Yeah.
episode. We
It's so
decided
fun.
I know this is episode one. We decided that it might be good to I don't know, branch out into the YouTube community, especially because we are recording on Zoom. Although half the time I look like a little tiny potato that is just like flour when I show up. So we were like, we might as well, especially because today we'll be talking about something that's so popular that who knows, we might reach like on the YouTube platform. And if we hate it, we'll just never come back to YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
But today we will be talking about something very exciting for me, and this will be a series where we talk about a couple different ones because we agreed if we talked about all of them in one video, it would be like 50 hours long.
Yeah. We'd be here for 12 hours. So,
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to be talking about The Hobbit, the first one, An Unexpected Journey, and this last watch through is your second watch through,
yeah,
right?
this is my second time watching it. Yeah.
So, okay, before we start talking about it, I just want to ask you, like, as somebody catching it like a little bit later, do you, what do you think about it in like comparison to the hype? Like, do you feel like it lives up to the hype of like Middle Earth and like that whole world?
I think because I watched the Lord of the Rings movies
Mhm.
first, I think that kind of messed it up for me. Like, I was like, I should have just, I guess, watched them in order because the Hobbits are the prequels. So, like, maybe I should have just watched the Hobbit first and then watched the Lord of the Rings movies. Because watching the Lord of the Rings movies and then watching the Hobbit, I was like, like, I was like, it's not, I guess, and I've told you this before. Like, I was like, it's not they're bad, they're
Yeah.
good. But like, I was just like, I think for me watching the Hobbit, I'm like, it's missing, I don't know, I guess like the action of like Lord of the
Uh-huh.
Rings. Like I was like fully invested in kind of like their quest and everything in the Lord of the Rings movies. And then this one I'm like, I mean, cool, Thorin's cool, but like what else? you know? Like
Right.
Bilbo's really cool. I like his character, like his development, because I can relate to him um very well, especially how he was like in the beginning. Which we'll get into. But um yeah, I don't know, it's not like they're bad, it was a bad movie or a bad
Hmm.
experience. I felt like there was just kind of like, I don't necessarily know what was missing. It might have been the action, or maybe it's just because it's like a different story.
Yeah.
um that just to me was like, that was like the difference, but I didn't hate it. Like I didn't like,
Right. Well, to be fair, I'm pretty sure the book The Hobbit came out before the Lord of the
Mhm.
Rings book, so maybe that's why. Because it builds, there's more of a sense of urgency in the Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
for obvious reasons. Like
Yeah.
in The Hobbit, if the dwarves don't get back their mountain kingdom, it doesn't really matter to like the fate of Middle Earth
Yeah.
as a whole so much as like the Lord of the Rings. Like if Frodo does not destroy the ring, Sauron is going to take over all of Middle Earth, and
Yeah.
that is not good.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I totally can see that. And there it's especially in this one, there's not a ton of like fighting action scenes,
Mhm.
whereas I feel like Lord of the Rings is a lot of like battle scenes.
Yeah. Battle
So
scenes for sure.
yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting take.
Mhm.
So um because there's so much that goes on in the movie, I figured the best way to talk through this movie was just to go through the plot points and just kind of see where we go from there. Actually, first, I'm going to read the little description that was on IMDb. The movie came out in 2012.
Okay.
And the little description is a reluctant hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, sets out to the lonely mountain with a spirited group of dwarfs to reclaim their mountain home and the gold within it from the dragon Smaug. So, okay, now I will read the beginning plot point. So, I really liked the way that it began because it was made by basically the same people.
Yeah. Peter Jackson directed, yeah, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies. Yeah.
Yeah. So it had that like familiar feel. And this time around when I was watching, I was like, what is the opening line? Because I'm really interested in like opening, closing
Mhm.
lines.
Mhm.
And he starts with, my dear Frodo. And it immediately evokes this sense of like familiarity because then the Shire music plays in the background and it's like
Yeah.
old Bilbo, who rest in peace, by the way, to Sir Ian Holm, who I think
Mhm.
passed away this year or last year. I don't remember. Um, but I liked that they kept that kind of like familiar feel to it, because then also like when they go to Rivendell it's the same music, but then they add in like the Misty Mountains music and like some new places. So I thought that was cool that you're like, no, I know this place. Now it's just going to expand the story a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's going to build on something that you already knew. Like the whole scene with Frodo is like basically right before the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. What did you think about that?
I like how they still kept us connected with the people from Lord of the Rings, obviously because they're in the same, I was about to say universe. This is not Marvel, but they're in
They
the same,
are. That's
yeah,
true.
they're in the same like world essentially. So I thought it was cool. I mean, they did it. I mean, obviously it makes sense for Bilbo to be writing to Frodo because that's the point of Frodo's whole thing. But also even when like they reference to like other people, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Okay, guys, just so you know, I'm terrible at the characters' names, okay? So please don't crucify me in the comments, please. I may not remember them. I might have nicknames for them, but you know who I'm talking about.
I'll be the Arielle translator for this video.
So one of the dwarves is the dad of the dwarf in Lord of the Rings, and I can't remember his name. He's red. He has red hair.
Oh yes, Gloin. He's
Yes,
dad.
I love him. And I was like, I know it starts with a G, but I didn't want to mess it up. So yes, so I like how they still keep us connected to like all the other characters.
Yeah.
I don't know. When you said like my dearest Frodo, it kind of also reminded me of like Paul writing letters to Timothy. I literally don't know why that immediately came to me when you said that. I was like, yeah, it's kind of like how like Paul is writing his stories of like his like adventures basically in his walk of like, you know, following Jesus and stuff. Like Bilbo was like, hey Frodo, this is what happened in my life and what I experienced. And he like left that for him to like, you know, read and like be inspired by. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's very, I feel like everything has gotten me thinking about legacy recently just because we're in the year of legacy at my church. And even the fact that Frodo adds to the book later, he adds the Lord of the Rings and then he gives it to Sam to add. I think that's like really beautiful. I think legacy is a huge theme throughout all of these movies. Like the because Bilbo affected him in positive ways because he has courage, but he also affected him in really negative ways because him picking up the ring, thinking like, what's this weird thing in this cave, affected the entirety of Frodo's life and all of Middle Earth. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And then we go into talking about Erebor. First of all, the visuals of the mountain are so beautiful when you see it from like the outside and like the entrance and like the music you're just like, wow, this is so nice. The visuals of the Lord of the Rings movies aren't like pretty good too, I feel like, for the time, you know, but you can feel like the difference in cinematography.
It's also like the colors too. I feel like The Hobbit is much brighter
Yes.
The Lord of the Rings. Like
Yes.
think of the Shire, you're like, oh, there's greens and there's oranges and yellows and all of that. And it's super bright and pretty. And like I feel like Lord of the Rings was like much darker because obviously the theme of what was going on. But yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's true. Yeah. And I think like the dwarves and the hobbits are just like the more happier races. I don't know if you would call them races, species. I don't know like what exactly the distinction is.
With these species, or let's just say demographic.
Sure. That's a good catch-all word. They are like more happy, I feel like, than like, the wizards or the elves who are all like very angsty.
They're very stoic and just like uppity, you know. So
yes. So this prologue, I feel like this is a very weird comparison because they're very different stories. But the way I feel about this like prologue intro to the dwarves and what happened to them is the way I feel about the prologue in the original Beauty and the Beast, because it's just so good. Like the words, the visuals, like the message, it's all really good. And it sets us up for like the story that is to come. So basically we find out that there's like the city of Dale, which is like where humans live, and then there's like the dwarves who live under the mountain in this place called Erebor, and the king is Thror, and they really love gold, which reminds me of like Snow White almost immediately. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't the intention, but that's what it reminds me of.
Okay.
And then they find this stone, which they call the heart of the mountain. It's the Arkenstone. It's very glowy. It's very pretty. And Thror is like, this is a sign that I am supposed to be the king. And he makes everybody come and pay homage to him. And then he ends up going mad with greed. There's this really great quote. A sickness began to grow in him. It was a sickness of the mind. And where sickness thrives, bad things will follow. So he ends up like losing his mind. A dragon comes in, is like, I want all your gold, and drives them all out of the mountain. And in like preparing for this video, when I was watching, I was like, does the Arkenstone have like powers associated with it? Because I was kind of like, what is the big deal? And I looked it up, and the answer is no. It's literally just like it's just a really nice, pretty gem. And it kind of reminded me of like how sometimes people will interpret certain like prophecies from God the way that they want to. They'll hear something and they're like, okay, so this is a sign that I'm supposed to do this. And you're like, no, I actually don't think that that's true at all. But people will perceive things the way that they want to. So it's like in his head, I feel like the Arkenstone exposed what was already there. Like,
yeah. And the other thing is, wasn't he already the king?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. I was like, you're already the king. How is this a sign that
he was already the king? So he took it as a divine sign that he was supposed to be the king, and then made everybody come and like pay respect to him, because he had found this stone. He didn't even find it. Like it was some random unnamed.
Yeah, he was literally just, looking for gold and stuff. And he's like, oh, this pretty rock.
Right, exactly. So I thought, well, what did you think of that? Before I talk about like what happens when they leave the mountain, what do you think of like that whole story?
I mean, obviously it's supposed to set up the plot for the movie. But like, I mean, I think what you were saying about like the prophecies and stuff, I was like, I think even people interpret like prophecies as them happening like right now. Like it's like, oh, you get this word or you get this prophecy from someone, they're like, oh, that means it's gonna happen tomorrow, or like it's gonna happen right after I leave the service. And it's like, no, because sometimes it takes years, like, or generations for it to happen. Like basically like it took his grandson having to like basically reclaim everything back. Like, so he basically died because of his greed and his obsession with gold, which I think is always very telling, because the love of money or the love of like power and stuff really messes people up. Because like he literally, even when like Smaug was coming, he literally wasn't trying to leave. Like he was like, no, I need to stay here and I need to have this stone. And then he lost the stone and like literally almost went into the pit of gold just so he could get it. And his grandson would be like, nah, we gotta go.
Right.
So
it's not worth your life.
Willing to die for something that like
didn't
actually mean anything.
Right. Yeah, I think greed is just like a huge theme in this movie in general, and is something that like you see Thorin struggle with throughout the movies as well, because it is like, I feel like there's so much like generational curse, generational blessing, like in Bilbo's family, in the elves, like in all the communities and across all the demographics.
Because I was gonna say greed even comes up in Lord of the Rings because of the ring. Like the ring basically makes all your like hidden desires like come true, or it like amplifies like the dark part of you that like really wants like power and like status, and but it strips at the same time, because Schmeagol, my God, is literally doesn't even look like a human like at all. Like he's become this creature that's just obsessed with this ring that gives him literally nothing.
Right.
Because he thinks it's giving him everything, but like he literally is like this basically goblin-like creature living in the woods with a loincloth.
Yeah, just and a split personality.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about him, because I know how much you love him.
I would say love, but
and I feel every time he appears, I'm like, ew. Like truly ew. Andy Serkis, an amazing actor, but
phenomenal. I was just thinking because I like went back and like watched where like I had fallen asleep, as you know. So I went back and started watching where I had fallen asleep, and like it's when Smeagol comes in, like he's introduced into the movie, and how they like introduced him, I feel like it's way creepier than in Lord of the Rings. Cause like he
Mhm.
comes in, his eyes are like glowing, and I was like, whoa. I was
Right.
like, wait a second. Um, but yeah, we'll get on him.
We will definitely get back to him when his moment to shine arrives. So the last thing I wanted to talk about in this prologue is when they go outside the mountain
Mhm.
and you see Thranduil on the mountainside with all the elves,
Mhm.
and they beg him to help, and he turns away and goes back.
Dramatically.
Very dramatically,
He's
very
like,
dramatically.
I was
Yes,
like, oh, okay.
and doesn't help.
No.
And I don't remember if they say this in the moment, but I think maybe I don't know if we find it out in the prologue or if we find it out later that he like was almost killed by a dragon, and he fought a dragon. He has that whole face thing
Mm,
that, I don't think that happens in this movie.
I
Um,
don't think so. I think it might have been the second one.
Maybe. But my question to you is like, do you think that the elves owed the dwarves any help? Like, what do you think about that situation?
I guess like so the elves are like essentially like these like superior beings, right? They have more like power or
Yeah.
like whatever. So I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just someone that's just like, I mean, if you rode all the way over here.
Right.
You rode all the way over here with your army that you know could defeat this dragon or this thing, and you just like they were like literally begging, screaming for help because they were
Mhm.
basically being killed, and like you just were like, no, like what,
Right.
like what was the point of that? But then obviously we learn now it's because like oh he was probably scared and like because he didn't want to be killed by this dragon. But I
Right.
think like I don't know if you're gonna make the journey to go all the way over there to
Yeah.
help, you might as well try.
Right.
Like you might as well try to help them in some aspect. Because then like yeah, then you see like Thorn, he's like, yeah, I don't mess with them. He's like, they're not, trustworthy. I'm not really trying to be around them.
Yes.
All because you did that. So it's like I think they should have helped them. I don't and I'm like, I know they're not like immortal, but it's like you guys have like powers and stuff. Like you can like
Mhm.
do things that the dwarves couldn't. So you could have
Right.
like tried.
Right. And I feel 80% that way. I think I used to feel 100% that way until, I don't know, when I rewatched it this time, it got me thinking about what you just said. Like, why did they come all the way out here and then turn around? And
Yeah.
I wonder, I think part of it is like Thranduil's trauma with the
Mhm.
dragon and how he was like, the dragons have killed my people before.
Yeah.
And I wonder, this is purely speculation, but I wonder if he came and realized like they're okay. They don't have their mountain home, but they're all fine. They
Mm,
just don't have the gold anymore. So they don't actually need our help. Like we're not gonna
yeah.
fight a dragon for gold. Um, they're
Yeah.
just gonna have to find a new home. So I don't know. I think if I had to choose, like, would I have him help? Yeah, I would. But I think I have just a little more empathy for the
Mhm.
elves in this situation. So I don't know. I also have like beef with Thorin. Like I feel like
He's just
so much.
I his character, it was hard for me to like him.
Yeah.
Like I remember even watching the first time, like I was like, he's really annoying. Like
Yes.
I get it. I get it. You're trying to have like revenge. You want to reclaim everything that your family lost, reestablish your legacy, all of that.
Hmm.
Great. Love that. But like, sir, calm down. Let's
Right.
let's take a breather. Let's work some of our issues out first.
Right. Half my notes were literally, why is Thorin catching an attitude right now? Like
All the time.
Bilbo does not owe him anything. Like that was half
No,
of my notes.
Bill didn't even want y'all to be around him in the first place. He
Right.
literally was trying to live his life quietly, and you guys bamboozled him, went
Right.
straight into his house, and we're like, "Yeah, we're going on this adventure to
Hmm.
reestablish everything." And he's like, "Cool, enjoy. I'm gonna be here."
Right. Yeah. And then I think that whole thing sets up Thorin's character really well because then there's that line, and he never forgave and he never forgot, which watching that for the first time, like you're immediately like, that's not good. That's
Yeah,
going to lead to problems. down the line. And once again, generational curses. If you don't deal with your past trauma, doesn't matter what you achieve, you're still going to have that in your heart. And another thing I noticed this time around too was that Thor, his grandfather, had the same like heart's desire as the dragon. They both had a heart's desire for gold.
He wanted gold.
And I was like, that's actually not good. Like, I feel like that symbolism is very significant.
You have the same desire as your enemy. Yikes.
Right, exactly. Okay, so then we go back to, after this whole little prologue, we go back to Bilbo in the present. And you see Elijah Wood come in as Frodo, which is kind of nice, you know. It's like, oh, there's Frodo, you know. And once again, it's like right before Fellowship of the Ring, so there's that sense of familiarity. And you get the idea that like, oh, we're gonna get the backstory to all of this. And so I have not read the books, except I read the first 100 pages of Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay.
And this little scene is basically what happens like in the first 100 pages, where it's like all the people are coming and they're like trying to steal Bilbo stuff because they think he's gonna like die soon and all this stuff. So it's kind of nice to have that like inserted into there. And also kind of ironic comparing, I think this is true of Lord of the Rings too, comparing like the Shire to the drama of everything else that's about to unfold. Like, the Shire is this like nice little removed.
Yep. They just like to enjoy their teas and their dinners and just
yes, for sure.
Sit by the fire, you know.
Yeah. And then, you know, Bilbo's like, everything will be different like when I and he implies like he's gonna go away, and Frodo's like, what is this man talking about? And then he goes outside to smoke a pipe, and I really like the transition with like the smoke, and then it goes to like Everett Ross, Martin Freeman. Everett Ross is his name in the Marvel movies. It goes back to Martin.
It's okay. It's fine.
There are so many people in both the like Marvel movies, old and new, and the Lord of the Rings series, which in my head kind of makes sense because they're both like fantastical movies. So that's always amusing to me. We'll see if that happens with like in the show, if there are going to be any people. But anyway, Martin Freeman is sitting outside smoking a pipe, and then Gandalf appears, and there's that whole like this conversation that he has with Bilbo about like it being a good morning. I saw that on TikTok. It was like a TikTok trend. I don't really know why. But I love the whole line where he's like, he says something about him being Gandalf, and he's like, and Gandalf means me. I don't know why, I've always loved that line. It's so
I just love Gandalf in general. He's just a great guy. Agreed. I think his character in this movie is much, I guess, not funny, but I don't know, I guess like more lighthearted. I guess he's not like as stressed about stuff as he is in like Lord of the Rings. He's just kind of like, hey, I had these group of people that want to go on this adventure. You want to come? Like, but in like Lord of the Rings, I felt like he was like, yeah, there's this journey that you need to go on. It's about to be pretty intense. So
yeah. And once again, I feel like he has nothing to lose. Like in this situation, he's just like, I'm just here to help because I'm really old and I feel like these people deserve a home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. He's definitely more, and then he like legitimately dies and comes back to life in Lord of the Rings. So that's you know, it's just a little more apparently stressful. So then he like, well, one thing I think is really interesting is that Bilbo is like, you're the guy who makes fireworks. And that, I'm like, isn't that the way that we talk to God sometimes?
Okay.
Because I feel like we've talked about this before, like offline, how Gandalf is one of the representations of like God. Not always. I think he is more the representation of God in this series than he is in Lord of the Rings. Because I feel like that one's more evenly divided. But I thought that was so funny because I was like, you have no idea half of the stuff that this man can do.
I was like
you just do magic tricks. You know?
I think Gandalf's just like, I mean, yeah, I do. I'm there. Yeah, they're pretty great. Yeah.
Right.
Like doesn't even try to be like, excuse me. Like he's just like, I do that.
I do great fireworks. And it's funny because he also has a history with like Bilbo's family. I always forget that like Frodo and Pippin are related. They're like cousins.
Oh,
Because he
I
says,
just find that.
yeah, because he says to Bilbo, like, I think on his mom's side he's a Took, which is like what
Mhm.
Pippin is. Pippin is
Yeah.
Peregrine Took, and
Mhm.
Gandalf is always calling him like fool of a Took and all that. Um, so that's interesting, and he reminds him of like his legacy once again,
Mhm.
and he's like, yeah, I have an adventure for you to go on. And Bilbo says about adventures, they are nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things, make you late for dinner, and then is like, no one will be going on an adventure today, and slams the door on Gandalf.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that whole
Yeah.
thing?
I mean, I wrote in my notes, I said, I am Bilbo Baggins. That was
Mm-hmm.
the first note that I wrote. And I was like, no adventures, just chilling. He just wants to live his life the way that he's been living it all
Yeah.
these years. And I wrote like that kind of just represents the comfort zone. Like we get very comfortable with our routines and what our lives look like, that like when something new comes along, we're like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Like I think and that's why I relate to Bilbo a lot, because I'm just like, yeah, if someone like Gandalf came to my front door, someone I'm not really that familiar with, but I'm still kind of aware of, was just kind of like, hey, you should go on this adventure. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking. Like, I would just be like, what do you like? I'm very much a questions person. So I'm like, what's this adventure? What do I have to do? Am I going to die? What do I need to pack? Like, what exactly does this adventure entail? I'm very
Right.
much that person. Bilbo is straight up like, no. He's like, no. And I wonder if that's like because maybe he like had like tried to go on adventures or something in the past and it was just kind of like, not for me. I'm
Mhm.
good where I'm at in the Shire. I like where how my life is right now, which are how a lot of people are. A lot of people are like, no, I like how my life is right now. I don't want to
Yeah.
change that. So I definitely relate to Bilbo in that aspect of like, because change is scary. Like
Mhm.
it is uncomfortable to just like go out and like do something that's like completely out of your comfort zone or out of your like realm of like normalcy. Like
Mhm.
Bilbo just wants to smoke his pipe, make his dinner, and
Read
live his
books.
best life, read
Right.
books, sit by the fire, which I'm like, sure, that sounds great. And then
Yeah.
like Gandalf's just like, no, I want like more for you, which again is like how God is with us. And one line I think I wrote, it was when like all the dwarves and everyone was coming into his
Mhm.
house and stuff. And he's like, I just want to sit quietly or whatever. And Gandalf's like, you've been sitting quietly for far too long. And I was like,
Wow.
oh,
The
God.
conviction, the dialogue in this whole movie, it felt like being hit by the Holy Spirit sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but that's true because there's nothing wrong with finding joy in your life.
Yeah.
There is something wrong, I think, with refusing to grow further.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think you're right because I think I don't remember at what point, but Gandalf alludes to like when you were young, you had all these dreams, and
Mm-hmm.
now you're kind of like, I am so good. Like I'm just gonna sit and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna hang out and I'm gonna vibe and it's gonna be fine. And Gandalf's like, it's not fine.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes ahead and is like, I'm gonna mark your door, and then
Yeah.
they're just gonna show up, and it's very
Yeah.
funny to me. Um, I think Dwalin is the first one who shows up, and Bilbo's like, "Do I know you?" And he's like, "No," and then just
And what's so cool is that like the mark is basically like a doorbell, which I was like, they didn't even have doorbells back
Mhm.
then. Not that
Yeah.
that place exists, but I was like, they didn't have doorbells back in that time, I guess, that it would be representing.
Right. So all these dwarves, it's Dwalin and then Balin shows up, who is like one of the people who was there when I think he's the only one who was there, I think.
He's the
When
really old one with the white.
he is, yeah. He's the one who like gives that moving little speech that we'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about in a second.
Mm-hmm.
They show up, they're eating all his food. I never noticed this until the most recent time that I watched, that when he gives Dwalin, the first dwarf, like all the plate of rolls of bread, he takes one and hides it behind his back. Like, why are you doing this? Like, what is going on? And you can tell he's like in his robe, like when all these people are showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Philly and Killy show up, and I don't know why, but it makes me laugh every time when Killy's like, "You must be Mr. Buggins."
I love Killy, as you know.
Yes,
I literally wrote Killy Bay in
yeah,
my notes.
I understand. I understand. The actor is very cute, and I feel like as a character, he's just like a very hopeful dwarf.
Yeah.
So they all start showing up and doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and he's like, what are you guys doing? You're taking all my food, you're making such a mess. And they start like throwing plates and singing
But
about,
they're cleaning up.
they are. I'm always so impressed by the fact that they don't drop a single plate. Like when he comes in,
Mm-mm.
they're all perfectly stacked, but I
Yep.
too, I would have been stressed for sure.
Yeah, no. Like I said, I am Bilbo Baggins. I am a control freak. I admit it. If people, again, strangers that I didn't know came into my house and all of a sudden were eating my food and they started throwing plates, I would literally be like I would be like, please, 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 just let me do it. Don't touch anything. Yeah.
Yes. But it's funny to me. I had written this in my notes from the first time that they are more joyful than Bilbo and they have no home.
Yeah.
Bilbo has everything and he's so
Mm-hmm.
stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And also stressed about sharing. Like if he had asked these
Yeah.
people, he would have found out like they have nothing. They are wanderers.
Mm-hmm.
All they have is like hope in each other.
Yeah.
So I think that that's, I think that that's really interesting. So yeah, so that whole, and then also just the idea of like God will send people to you. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's ultimately gonna let you make the choice of whether or not you want to
Yeah.
participate, but he will send reminders and signs of like, this is what I want you to do. Here's another reminder. And you're like, no. And he's like, well, here's another reminder, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then Thorin arrives, dun, 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 and it becomes noticeably darker to the point where Gandalf is like, Bilbo, can you bring some more light? Like
Such
they
a mood killer.
they did it good. Yeah, he just arrives like I don't, does Thorin smile at any point in the series? Like actually I'm gonna watch for that because I feel
I
like
feel like he doesn't. He's
I,
just so like all the time.
yes, yeah. So the mood completely shifts. He comes in, he sits down, and they ask him like, are our cousins, he went to go talk to Dane, and he's like, Dane said that they're not gonna help, which I was kind of like, I see both sides. I see why Thorin would want to reclaim, and I see why his cousins would be
Mm-hmm.
like, we're not going through that again.
Yeah.
That's too much work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then they talk about whether they're like enough, whether they're smart enough, whether they're,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And then
Sing the sad song.
it's right after this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Right after this conversation, because before that, they proposition Bilbo with like being the burglar.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, he doesn't look like a burglar, and he's like, who said I was a burglar? And like and they have this whole conversation, and they start talking about the dragon, and they show him the thing for him to sign, and that's when he starts
Mm-hmm.
being like, I could die, like I could be burnt to death.
Mm-hmm.
There's no guarantee, right?
Yeah.
He's like, there's no guarantee that I'll come back safe. And they're like, no, like we're going to go fight a dragon. Like how would you guarantee me that you're not
How
gonna
do you
die?
expect that to end positively in any way?
Right. Yeah. And I feel like in every first movie of the series, there has to be a scene where like Gandalf dramatically stands up and darkens Bilbo's home. Because they're like saying that Bilbo doesn't look like a burglar, and he's like, if I say Bilbo Baggins is a burglar, then a burglar he is. And they're all like, you know, because he sees something in Bilbo that none of them,
Mhm.
including Bilbo, see in
Yeah.
himself, which I think that's really powerful
Mhm.
as well. And I think there are a lot of really good.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sorry, that just
Go ahead.
clicked. That just clicked in my brain
What?
because he took the ring. He technically
Yeah,
took the ring
he
from
did.
Smeagol.
He
I was
did
like,
burgle that.
wait, he is. Wow.
He did. Well, wow. Um, so anyway, so there are lots of really, no, it's okay. There are lots of really good quotes at this table. For example, when the birds of yore return to Erebor, the reign of the beast will end. I was like, that sounds like it came out of Revelation, first of all.
First of all, yeah.
Um, and then if we have read the sign, do you not think others have seen them too?
Mm.
That really resonated with me. And then there two more, or well, the one that you said, you've been sitting quietly for far too long, and reminding him of his childhood. The world is not in your books and maps, it's out there. That convicted me because I was like,
Mm.
are
I'm
you
like,
sure?
I love a good book. I
I love my
mean,
books and maps.
my books send me off to different worlds,
Right,
different universes, you know?
right.
What's
And
wrong with
then
that?
right. And then when he returns the key that they thought was lost, and one of them says, if there is a key, there must be a door. I was like, that is prophetic. That is
That's
really
good.
beautiful.
That's good.
So yeah, and then Bilbo's not like super certain. They're not really selling him. He faints, in this
Mhm.
whole situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it pans to Balin and Thorin talking, the old
Mhm,
dwarf
mhm.
in the hallway. Yeah. And he's basically saying to Thorin, like, you don't have to do this. You've done enough for us. Which I was like, this scene is actually very sweet. And then he has that whole spiel where he's like, no, I have to for my people. And he's like, I know that there are a few of us, but then he talks about like the people who came. He says, I would take each and every one of these dwarves over an army from the Iron Hills. For when I called, they answered. And I was like,
Come
period.
on.
Period. Um, because I mean, that's true. I think showing up, consistency, and
Mhm.
bravery is a lot more meaningful most of the time than
Yeah.
any like strength that you have. If you have all the strength and you have all these talents, but you never use them,
Yeah.
it's like the person in the Bible who buries the talent. He's like, I
Mhm.
hid it for you. And Jesus is like, I don't even know who you are. So, um,
Yikes.
so I liked that. And then they sing what you called the sad song, the Misty Mountain song, which then becomes like the theme throughout the
Mhm,
movie. Um, it reminds me of the song Pippin sings in Return of the King, which is
mhm.
like one of my favorite scenes. But what were your thoughts on that whole like hymn? It sounded like a hymn, basically.
Yeah, I just remember it being like, "Oh, this is sad." Like, I guess I didn't have, like, any other thought behind it where I was like
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it was supposed to be kind of like a hopeful song because it's kind like you said, it's like the theme of, like, their whole thing. But, like, I don't know, anytime when someone just starts singing a song and everyone's quiet in the room, I'm like, "Oh, this is like a
Yeah.
moment."
Well,
So
it's sad. They talk the lines are like uh the pines were roaring on the height, the winds were moaning. I think in the night they say, and they talk about like the fire consuming
mhm.
the whole mountain. And
Yeah.
in my head, it's like a song of remembrance,
Mhm.
basically, which is important. It's important to remember the past, especially as they're moving forward, like to remind themselves like what they are facing.
Yeah,
So,
and basically kind of like what they're returning to,
mhm,
because it's not gonna look the same as it was
yeah.
because it was destroyed.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. And a lot of people are probably gone too,
Mhm.
a lot of people are gone
Yeah.
who were there before. It's not gonna, like you said, look the same. So then they fall asleep and Bilbo wakes up the next morning and they're all gone. And he has a moment of, I don't know, clarity or revelation, and he
Yeah.
runs,
Look.
sprints outside the house. His neighbor's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "I'm going on an adventure." It's like the
Mhm.
classic line. And in my head, I think he chose like, "I don't want to live with regret," so he chases after them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I wrote, Bilbo took the risk of adventure,
mhm.
and, like, it made me think about, like, the cost of taking risks, because like, he knew the cost, he knew the risks, and was still like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Mhm.
Which again shows like the beginning of his like character development
Mhm.
because very adamantly before was like, no, got the wrong guy. It's
Mhm.
not me. And then like, I don't know what happened after he passed out, but he woke up and all of a sudden was like, hey, sure, why not? Because like I was thinking about like what were his like, I guess the costs that he like sacrifice. And I was like, well, I guess like his comfortable life, his
Mhm.
cushy, comfortable life, his own personal existence life,
Right.
because it was
To
like I
die.
could be
Yeah.
killed by a dragon, or even whatever, because as we see later on, they encounter so many different
Yeah.
beings that are just trying to kill them for no reason, but just to kill them and eat them, basically. It's just like he went without kind of thinking about all the questions of
Mhm.
or all the details of what happened. So I thought that was cool, or that stood out to me.
I think when you make any decision that's risky, there is a part of you that does have to ignore. Not that you shouldn't think things through practically. It reminded me of like me going to this PhD program. Like there are things I can plan for, but there are things I just honestly I just have to jump and figure it out along the way. Because if he was gonna sit there and think like these are all the ways I could die, these are all the things I could lose. Like sometimes you have to be a little impulsive, like just like him sprinting out of, and he can't even really answer his neighbor. Like he's like, where are you going? He's like, I'm just going on an adventure. I don't know what that means, you know, and I'm not going to think about it. I can't possibly know all the answers. So yeah, weirdly, I was like, not this movie speaking to me about my life in academia. This movie about hobbits and dwarves.
Yeah, no. I think it just speaks to me in general. I'm very much a comfort zone person. So yeah.
Yeah. So then he meets up with them in the woods and they put him on a pony. He is not a fan.
Which I did not realize that they were riding on ponies because they're small. I was literally like, he was like, give him a pony. I was like, a pony? Why did they give it? Oh, I was like, oh, right. They're small people. They don't
Yes.
need a big horse. That would look crazy.
Yeah.
The only person who needs a horse is Gandalf.
Right. And like that scene in Bilbo's house where one of the dwarves gives him a wine glass and it's like a shot. And then he's like, this tiny little glass. So yes, they put him on I feel like I would react the same way. I'd be like, I'm okay, like I can just walk. I don't need to get on this animal.
I don't want to be an inconvenience, you know.
Yeah. And then he makes them all stop because he forgot his handkerchief. And
I was like, sir.
Right.
Here you go.
Yes. So it's his first experience with like things are not going to look the way that they did before. And Gandalf says something like that to him. And then he says, you were born to the rolling hills of the Shire, but home is behind now. The world is ahead. And it's like a voiceover. And I love that. I don't know why. It's just really beautiful.
I mean, he has to go into like a thing with no structure. Like they're obviously on a journey, but like, you know, like the things that are going to happen, like they don't get to rest at like an inn somewhere. Like you don't have a bathing pool somewhere. Like it's just, you're roughing it.
Right. Yeah. So there's that. And then there's the whole scene where like Bilbo realizes that Gandalf bet on him that he would come, which is nice and moving. And then they go to sleep on the mountainside and they're by a fire. Philly and Killy make jokes about orcs, and then Thorin in his classic angstiness is like, orcs are not a joke. You think this is funny? And
you gotta laugh, okay? This is a very stressful situation. Okay.
Philly and Killy are like, sorry, Dad. Like immediately. And then Balin tells the story of what happened after, about how they went back, they tried to reclaim the mountain, and then this big important character, Azog, the Defiler, who is they also call the Pale Orc, he's like a really big orc, decided that he was going to kill the line of Durin. I looked up what that meant. Apparently, Durin is the oldest of the first 7 dwarves, which once again I was like,
right.
Durin's line apparently, so they're like the oldest race of dwarves, and they live the longest. Like they live to be like 400 or 500. I think this is according to like the Lord of the Rings Fanpedia that I was on. Yeah. So this guy, I'm like basically like the devil. He's like, okay, so I'm gonna wipe out all of the children of Israel.
Right.
And he beheads Thror and lifts up his head, and then Thrain, Thorin's dad, who knows what happens to him? He goes crazy, he disappears, he's killed, he's kidnapped, nobody knows, and he never reappears, so we don't know. And then they're being beat by the orcs, and then Thorin. So this, I told Arielle this, that I always forget that Oakenshield is like not his government name. He is called that because he defended himself against Azog with an oaken branch as a shield, and was able to cut off his arm and drive back the forces. They weren't able to take back the mountain, but they defeated the orcs that day. It reminds me, of course, of like David and Goliath. And then they assume Azog is dead, which we find out later is not true. And then Balin has like this one really great quote where he says, well, he has 2 great quotes actually. He said, Azog the Defiler learned that day that the line of Durin would not be so easily broken. I thought that was good. And then there's this like really powerful moment where he says, I realized that there is one who I could follow. There is one who I could call king. And then you see them in the present and they've all like stood up and they're all looking at Thorin. I'm like, so nice. This is so touching.
I like really believe in him.
Yeah, because he like his action as one person, I think in his head he probably was like, I have nothing to lose.
Yeah, like like both of the people I've descended from have literally just died.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah. So, and his actions like inspired the entire army to rally and fight back and drive back the forces. So, to me, it shows like the difference that one person
Yeah.
can make. Um, so do you have any other thoughts on like that section?
Um, I remember I wrote, "What's the point of fork arm?" But now hearing you talk about it, fork arm, by the way, is who I call Azog, you guys,
Yeah.
because I was like, I don't care to know his name, but I can remember him by his physical
Yeah.
characteristic, which is a little three-pronged stick at the end of his limb. Yeah.
And I did not realize until this time watching it that it sticks out the back of his arm.
Yeah. So
It's literally like
he
this.
just didn't even try to put it in the right way. He just shoved it in there.
I was like, that's disgusting. That's literally disgusting.
I mean, it fits for his character.
It
So
does. Yeah. It really does. The evil characters are so ugly. Like across the Hobbit,
yes.
the ring.
Oh my God. When I was obviously going back and rewatching the part where I like fell asleep at, I was like, this Goblin King, I was like, he's disgusting.
He is.
Like I was like, ew. Like how did I not notice how gross he was when
He's
I
like
watched
warts
it?
all down his like
Yeah.
chin. It's like droop. It's disgusting. When he appears on screen, I'm like, I don't want to look. Like I just think he's so ugly. So anyway, so after that, they're back on the road. They're in the rain, and the one dwarf is like, "Can you make the rain stop?" And Gandalf is like, "If you wish to change the weather of this world, you should find another wizard." And that made me laugh because it reminds me of just like us. We make a big deal out of stuff that's not always a big deal. And it reminds me of when the disciples woke up Jesus and is like, this, they're like the storm, and he's like, just relax, like, and he makes the storm calm down.
Like you guys have never been in a storm before? Oh, okay.
Right. So not everything we perceive as a problem is a problem. And you also need rain. Like the land needs rain.
Mm-hmm.
And then he starts talking about Radagast the Brown, who is like the Coachella of the wizards, I feel like. Or like the Woodstock of wizards. And then it pans to him. And he's in the woods. And or actually, does that happen now?
That's the
Yeah.
wilderness man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. You were saying his name and I was like, wait. And I was like, wilderness man.
The
Okay.
wilderness man. So it pans to him and he's in the woods and like all this stuff is like dying or like decaying. And he finds this little porcupine, Sebastian, who was dying. And he's like, oh no, Sebastian. And so he brings him into the I love so much that he rides around on a sleigh of rabbits. That is the best part about his character for me.
I just love him so much.
So then he's like, no, Sebastian. And he's like trying to heal him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it's not working. It doesn't make sense. This isn't witchcraft. And then he's like, unless it is. And then he like sucks the darkness out of Sebastian, the porcupine. He comes back to life.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember which animals tell him, maybe the birds, but they're like, oh, the evil came from this place, which is, it's called Dol Guldur. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And it's supposed to be an abandoned evil place that I learned was Sauron's stronghold in the war, like before when he had, because we're in between like when Isildur kills him, we think, and when he comes back and is like the big, you know, eye in Lord of the Rings. So yeah, and then he's like, oh, I have to now go warn people, and then it pans back to the dwarves. So thoughts on the wilderness man?
I just love him. I literally just wrote, I love the wilderness man in my notes. I don't know, his whole character is just very like, he's someone that's like, he enjoys his life as well. Like he loves being with the animals. Like he enjoys being with them, being by himself. I feel like he just has adventures every day, being in the woods and just enjoys his life. And I'm like, good for you. He's not like, having to do these like crazy quests or anything. He's like, I just live in the woods and I am besties with the animals.
Right. And it makes sense.
Names.
It makes sense to me that what'd you say?
I said he gave them names, like
yes,
Sebastian the porcupine. Like
it makes sense to me that he's the first one to know that evil is coming because it's like the earth shows it. It's kind of like in Moana when like the land starts like turning black and like things start dying. And when I watched it, not this time but the time before, I wrote in my notes like, is he supposed to be John the Baptist? Because
the way
that would make so much sense to me if he was inspired by, because people thought the same thing about him. They were like, he like eats grasshoppers and like or no, he eats locusts and like wild honey, and he is just this like crazy man like out
in the desert doing whatever.
Yeah, and the Chosen portrays him that way as well. Everyone is like, this guy is so weird, like you know what I mean, but he hears from God. And Radagast, like, he may be a little crazy, but when he appears later, like what he has
he helps them. They have to go to him at some point for his help. So
yeah, well, he comes to them like later.
Yeah.
And he's like, stuff is going on, Gandalf, you should go check that out. But maybe it's like that very craziness that is what's used to like report the future. So
is there a verse about that? The God will use the foolish
things to confound the wise. Yes, for sure. So John the Baptist, you know, may he rest in peace, is one of those people. Okay, so after that all happens, we haven't yet gotten to the point where they are like together, I'm pretty sure. The dwarves go to camp in a place that is abandoned. Gandalf is like, a farmer and his family used to live here. I don't really like this place. Something about it is a little sketchy to me. I don't think we should stay here. And Thorin is like, we will stay here because we will not be going to Rivendell. And I'm like, Thorin.
It's so ridiculous.
It's he does this, I think, twice in this movie where he doesn't listen to Gandalf. Like he overtly like disobeys Gandalf. And it reminds me of Peter in Prince Caspian, where he's like, I'm not waiting for Aslan, and then like there's that really sad scene with the centaur where he's hold the thing and he dies. It's so sad.
Anytime I watch like these movies or whatever, it makes me want to watch like Narnia.
You should. Ooh, we should do a series on Narnia.
Listen, if we do a Narnia series, I will not apologize for who I become. Okay.
Actually, we should put that in our list because, you know, I love both authors, both books. So we'll talk offline about it. So anyway, so Thorin's like, I hear you, Gandalf, but I hate the elves, so I'm not going there. And Gandalf says, I did not give you that map or key for you to hold on to the past. And I'm like, that's a good line. But Thorin's still like, I don't care.
He's like, I don't care.
I'm not going to the elves. And that just showed me to like, I wrote, learn to read signs of danger when they're apparent, because like, you don't think it's sketchy that people used to live here and then all of a sudden they just vanished. Yeah. That's not weird to you. You're in the middle of the woods. And then Gandalf leaves. They don't know why. He just leaves.
Yeah.
And so then they, you know, they try to go to sleep. Bilbo gets up, and then he sees Philly and Killy, your mans, who are supposed to be guarding the ponies, but two of them are missing. So they're like, okay, let's go figure out who took the ponies, which I'm like, you're better than me, because I would have been like, that's weird that these ponies are missing. Guess where I'm going to stay? Right here in
my little slumber. That's where I'm going to be.
Right. So then they go looking for it, and they find 3 trolls. And they're like, Bilbo, you're the burglar, so you go in and you get the ponies. You're much lighter than us. They're not going to hear you. And then he gets caught in like the most disgusting way. I hate the trolls because they're so gross.
He gets caught. All the creatures that are like fighting them or against them they're just not good looking.
The way I feel about like bodily fluids is that I hate them. And so I'm like, I can't even look at Bilbo right now because he's covered in snot, and it's so disgusting. So anyway, so he gets captured. It's his first burgling test, and he fails. And then the dwarves all come to rescue him. Philly and Killy go and get everybody. And that's like a nice scene where they come in, because I think they leave you to wonder for a second, like, are they going to just leave him to die? And they are kind of beating the trolls, but then the trolls like capture Bilbo, and they're like, put down your arms or else we'll kill him. And
that's when all of them are all tied up, right? And they're like putting some of them on the spoke, or is that what it's called?
Spit. It's called a spit.
Wow. My God. Words. Right. But yeah.
And it's funny because when Thorin is like, he puts down his arms, like Killy beside him looks like shocked that he would do that he would like put down his arms for like this random hobbit.
Yeah.
So So they get all tied up.
Oh, this is the parasite thing where he's like, oh, I have a parasite, and then they're all like, oh no, I have the worst one, and I have a parasite that's worse than his, and they're just like,
right, because one of the trolls makes the mistake of saying, we have to hurry up before daylight, I don't want to get turned to stone, or something like that. Ooh, mistake. You talk too much, and you let your
got a little too confident there.
Right. And then Bilbo ends up stalling for time because he also sees Gandalf go past above. And then Gandalf says, like, the dawn will take you all, and then dramatically like uses his thing and they turn to stone.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you have any thoughts on that entire troll scene?
I mean, I think anytime they're getting like captured or whatever, it's always like, one, it's always a chance for like Bilbo to like redeem himself in some way, because he like kind of messes up. And then has to like fix it, because even when they get captured by, I think, the goblins after that, it's like he basically like falls off the bridge or something and like has to like come back. Did I mess that up, or did I fall asleep and mix two scenes up? I can't remember.
We'll get to that when we get
But I just remember they're like captured by the goblins and Bilbo tries to do something, and then like he ends up getting either knocked out or he falls somewhere, and that's where Smeagol comes in. But yeah, I think it always gives Bilbo the chance to redeem himself. And of course, you know, Gandalf always comes through when he needs to come through. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the trolls. They're annoying. They're also very dumb. Like they're trying to seem more like evil or, you know, intimidating than they actually are. But I'm like, you guys are three numbskulls trying to work this thing out.
Right.
And it's not working.
They're just big and loud.
Yep. Big, loud, and wrong. So yeah, I think that's just like a funny moment to me. I wasn't necessarily stressed. I remember watching that scene because I was just like, it was kind of like a funny moment where it's like, you know, Bilbo's trying to think on his feet and just, or I guess not on his feet because he's tied up, but he's trying to think like really quickly of like how he can like distract them and all of that. So I just really enjoy that scene where they're all like, no, I have a parasite. No, I have a worse one.
The parasites are huge.
Yeah.
You guys.
Especially because I remember like, it was like, I think Bilbo started it, but then like Killy like hears him say it, and so like they all kind of pause, and then Killy's like, no, I have a parasite, and then so then they all kind of join in again. And just love Killy. But no, I really like that scene. And then like the light turning them into stone. When you said that, I was like, I didn't catch that the first time, about how the light was the thing that made them turn into stone, which is really cool. It kind of reminds me, I was gonna say it kind of reminds me of Narnia, but the White Witch turned people into stone. It wasn't like a light turned them into stone thing. Well, technically a light did, but it was evil. But
yeah. Well, yeah, and that's what leads them to discover the cave, because Gandalf is like, how did they get this far? Like they couldn't have moved in daylight. So after that whole scene, Thorin and Gandalf have a conversation where Thorin's like, this guy sucks. This guy that you brought along sucks. And Gandalf is like, really, does he? Because he thought about something that none of you thought about. You would have been killed if he hadn't stalled for time. And that was interesting because it's like, they had said something to him in his house where they were basically like, you're too weak to go out into the world, or there are like wild things. Like, you need to be able to fight for yourself.
Yeah.
And fighting and strength doesn't always look like physical, like strength and sometimes brutality.
It's mental, like it's wit.
Yes, like like you said, he realized like these trolls are stupid. So the way I can defeat them is with my brain, because I am smart and they are not. So I think it's cool that Gandalf is like consistently Bilbo's advocate, even though Bilbo doesn't really believe in himself yet. He probably feels like, wow, I almost got all my friends killed.
He's still very much trying to figure out, I guess, like his place in this whole thing, like his role in it. Like he's just kind of going along for the ride, and then like he gets moments where he's like, oh, I have to fix this, like, oh, it's up to me, right, kind of thing.
Yeah. So then after this, Gandalf is like, there must be a cave. They look for a cave. They find a ton of gold. Of course, some of the dwarves stop and they're like, let's take all this gold. Which I'm like, you guys don't have the space. You barely have any ponies left for you even So why? But then they also
No.
some swords made by elves.
Mhm.
Gandalf finds like the world's tiniest sword and gives it to Bilbo for strength and courage.
Yeah.
And the
And it's a
goblin,
cute little sword, all blue and lights up.
it's cute, yeah. And then and it's supposed to glow when I think when goblins are nearby, and then one
Hmm.
is like the goblin cleaver or whatever, which
Yeah.
is foreshadowing of what is to come.
Hmm.
And then I realized in this scene, Thorin had enough sense to be like, let's not linger here in this. Like, I feel like there is like a fight going on inside of him of like his greed, desire for power, his bitterness, but also his desire to be better. Because he was kind of
Hmm.
like, just leave it. Like, you've taken
Yeah.
enough. Let's go.
I think he's also seen what it does to people, or specifically, he saw what it did to his grandfather.
Yeah.
So he probably was like, let's not take too much of this because I don't
Right.
know, this could affect me in some negative way.
Right. Yeah. So then they go back out and they hear rustling and they're like, what is that? But it ends up being the wilderness man, Radagast. And he's like, hey, Bilbo. And hey, Gandalf. And he's like, something bad is going on. Like
Hmm.
the Greenwood is dying. Sebastian the Porcupine, I almost lost him. Like not good things are happening. And then it's this back and forth between him and Sauron's stronghold and how he went there and he saw ghosts like the Witch King of
Hmm.
Angmar who appears in Lord of the Rings as a wraith.
Hmm.
But in this, he's a ghost, which he's like, this is not possible. We do not have
Yeah.
ghosts
Right,
in Middle
right.
Earth. Um, and then he sees the necromancer off in the distance who's like a dark figure, and I'm almost positive the necromancer says his name. I think he says Radagast, um
Hmm.
which I'm like, that's creepy. Like, if I showed up to this random abandoned place, fought like a ghost, and then like a dark figure was like, I'd be like, I'm gone.
Gotta go. I'm out of here.
Right, but then
Out of here.
he escapes on his sleigh of rabbits away,
Yes.
and then shows up to find Gandalf. Um, and he gives him an unidentified package that he says is not from the world of the living. We don't see what it is yet.
Mhm.
And then they are attacked by those big, like wolfish things that are apparently called wargs. I picked that up this time. I did not know that that's what they
Okay.
were called. And Radagast is like, I have a great idea. I'm going to lead them away on the sleigh of rabbits.
Mhm.
Um, but the problem is they're in like a big, wide open field.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to hide. And they end up being seen by some of the orcs and they have to fight and all this stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but Gandalf finds a little cave for them to go into. And this is another point where Thorin catches an unnecessary attitude where they're surrounded by the wargs and they're like, where's Gandalf? And Thorin's like, he has abandoned us, of course. And
He's
Gandalf is
just
like,
so dramatic.
Gandalf is behind them. He's like, hello. You turn around and
Found you guys some safety, by
come
the
on.
way.
Right. I'm like, you should be embarrassed, you know?
Ah.
Um, so then they follow him into the cave, and then you see like people ride by and kill the rest of the orcs, and then one of the bodies tumbles in and has an elf arrow.
Mhm.
Which the dwarves are kind of like, I don't know how to feel about this because you saved me, but I hate you.
Right.
Um, so then they follow this unknown cave to safety. And when they get there, it pans and you see Rivendell and you hear like the beautiful, like angelic music of Rivendell. The
Yep.
soundtrack, the scoring to this music, to this movie is so good.
Yeah.
This one, The Lord of the Rings, it's funny because I was watching and my mom, she wasn't necessarily watching, but she was like around. So every once in a while she'd be watching. And like in the scene with the goblins, I noticed the villainous music is very like drum heavy and it's very like trumpety. It's like ba 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 ba, and you have like the elves and it's like very like
Flutie.
harpy,
Mhm.
high,
Mhm.
like and I think it's supposed to represent like these are immortal beings. Or if you're in the Shire, it's very like fun and lighthearted.
Mhm.
So I think it was really cool that they were able to capture that in that way. And it's just nice to
Side note, scores are so important to film.
yes.
Like people think like, oh, who need no, you need scores.
Can you imagine this whole movie in silence?
No, like it's like you like every part of the film matters
Mm-hmm.
from like not just cinematography and direction, but like the music that's used is like it moves the plot along. It helps you understand the world that like you're watching, which is like I just love film things. It's just really cool.
It's really
Because like there are some movies that you'll watch and you're like, this music doesn't make sense with this scene, or like,
Mhm.
why did they put this in the soundtrack? It doesn't even
Right.
why. But like music is just so important too, especially movies like this where it's like a fantasy, so it's really driving the theme, or like really driving like what the world is supposed to feel like. So that was just
Right.
a little film critic side
No,
note that I wanted
it's
to put
true.
in there.
Which is why I think it's really important for fantasy movies specifically to have
Mhm.
their own soundtrack. I feel
Yeah.
like it wouldn't also, can you imagine like putting in existing music?
Mm-mm.
What would you even put? Like I, you know,
Yeah, like I guess you could use like, do you know that group like the Celtic women?
maybe.
Okay, so like I remember for some reason I just think of like dance class when I think of them,
Mhm.
because when we used to stretch in dance class, they used to play like the Celtic women like album while we like
Okay.
stretched before dance class. And like they kind of have that like ethereal
Okay, got it.
sound. Um yeah, I can't really think of like an example, but they have this kind of like, it sounds like kind of like a flute in a way. It's just very like slow and like, I don't
Cool.
know, it's ethereal sounding.
I'll have to look into it. I do listen to like ambient, like Rivendell to do
Hmm.
work all the time
Yeah.
because it's just like very like soothing. Or sometimes I'll
Hmm.
listen to like Lothlorien, which is where like the high elves live in the woods. Definitely, I would not listen to like ambient Mordor music because it is so like drum heavy. Because this is what I
Hmm.
was gonna say before. My mom was like, when I hear this music, it makes me feel anxious. Like, I'm like, that's the point. Like,
Yeah.
you're supposed to think what's coming, you know, like that happens in the Lord of the Rings when they're in Isengard. It's like just very like intense music, but then you get all these other places and it's like light and airy. And um so I thought that was cool. And they see Rivendell, and then Thorin is like, you did this on purpose.
You did this. You set me up. This
You
is a
did. And he
setup.
might have, honestly, he might have.
Maybe. I
Because,
mean, it's Gandalf. He's basically God. So yeah.
right,
Probably was like, yeah, you're gonna face your trauma. You're gonna get over yourself, and we're gonna be here.
right. And he's like, also, when we go in there, don't even talk because I don't trust you guys. Like, just leave
Mm-mm.
the talking to me.
Just let me run this part.
Let me do it. And they have no other choice. Like, they're not going to go back into the
No.
cave. They cannot go back at this point
Mm-mm.
where they are. And
Because if they go back, it's just orcs. So
right. And also, like Erebor and the Lonely Mountain is forward. So they have to go through this
mm-hmm.
uncomfortable place to get to
Yep.
where they want to be.
Yep.
So the scene where, so then they approach and they're like, where's Elrond? And he's like, oh, he's not here right now, but then he's approaching at that exact
Mm-hmm.
moment. And the
Mm-hmm.
scene where he rides in is for some reason one of my favorite scenes. It just looks so cool. It reminds me of when I went to King Richard's Fair and they had like a dramatic, like it was like a almost like a play, but they were on horses and they were fighting with each other. And it was just cool when they rode in on the horses. I was like, there's something
Yeah.
about riding in on a horse black that makes you look really cool.
Yeah. I mean,
um
don't they say Jesus is coming back on a horse? So
do they?
yeah, I feel like they say that. No, he's coming back on a cloud.
On a
But I
cloud.
feel like he's also on a like a majestic horse thing. I don't know. Whatever. It's fine.
I don't know. We read our Bibles, I promise.
Well, we do. I promise.
There's so much information. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard to remember, especially in Revelation. Like
Yeah.
Revelation is an interesting book to read for sure.
You got to have a commentary if you're going to read Revelation, because there's
Hmm.
just so many metaphors and symbols and images that I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, if you say a three-headed dragon with 12 to 15 horns is going to show up, cool. I guess it will.
They had eyes where? Like, why?
Everywhere. Eyes on wings, wings with heads,
Like the
heads.
horn has an eye and then the horn speaks. And it's like,
Yeah.
what?
And
Why?
I'm like, I guess that's what's going to happen.
It's really just peak. It's like advanced fantasy, I feel like.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so anyway, so Elrond approaches and
Mhm.
he's like, oh, we were off fighting orcs. I don't know why they were here. And Gandalf is like, that was probably us. We were probably, so we're like, okay, so they were the ones who saved them, which is good. I feel like that puts the dwarves a little bit at ease, but not really because they're very
Mhm.
stressful. They get, go ahead.
Elrond is Liv Tyler's dad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Yes.
He's like the
He just
Lord of
comes
like,
off as like, I can't ever tell if he's like nice or if that's just his face, because he's just always very serious all the time.
yeah, I think the elves in general. are just like that. And he
Very
is like,
stoic.
he's extremely old too. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
around when like Sauron fought Isildur. He was the one who was like, throw it into the fire, and he did not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's just seen some stuff, and he's like, there are bigger issues than these dwarves, not
Yeah.
like me. So
Yeah.
yeah, because even when thinking back to like Lord of the Rings and him with Arwen, like you could tell
Mm-hmm.
that there was a lot of emotion, but his face was still like,
Didn't move.
you have to go. Like I so anyway, so he's, they're talking about this, and then he says something to them in Elvish, and the dwarf who's like, what is he saying to us? Does he offer us insult? Is Gimli's dad, which is funny to me because I'm like, this is like foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Like Legolas
Because
and
Gimli
Gimli.
and Legolas are literally like enemies to lovers,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
Basically, enemies to lovers the entire series.
That's so funny. I
Oh,
love
I
their
love it.
Their like relationship is one of my favorites in the
Love it.
entire.
I also loved when they complained about the food. I thought that moment was funny too, where they're like, where's the meat? And I was like, me. Because I firmly was like, you guys are giving us rabbit food?
Right.
What?
He, like picks
What
up a
kind of
piece of
situation
lettuce.
y'all got going on over here?
I don't like green food. This is such a mood. And they have like people playing harps and all this and whatever. They're talking about their swords. So that's a nice little lighthearted scene. I think they do a good job of that, of interspersing like the darker, grosser moments with like moments of light and humor and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not just depressing the entire
Yeah,
way
I think
through.
that's good, especially for like the audience watching. Because if I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you guys are going to be depressed for 3 hours, I'm not interested.
No. Yeah, and you need to see like, I don't know, it's cool to see like the different worlds in Middle Earth as well. So then we pan to, it's Thor and Balin, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Elrond. They're talking about the dwarf map, and they're arguing because Gandalf is like, show him the dwarf map because it's written in ancient Dwarvish, which ironically only Elrond can read. And he's like, no. And Balin is like, don't give it to him. And then Gandalf is like, you have no other choice. You have to give this man the map. So he begrudgingly is like, here, take this map. So he reads it and he finds that the key needs to, well, no, he looks at it and he realizes that they're moon runes and that they have to be read. It's like the same moon of the night that the map was written. And he's like, oh, fate is on your side. That's tonight. So he was exactly where he needed to be.
Yep,
The right
at
time,
the
even though
right
it was an
time.
inconvenience for him.
Yeah.
For somebody, and that somebody is me. So then he reads the runes, and it says that the key to the mountain is supposed to be something about like the last light on Durin's day will reveal the spot where the key is supposed to go. And Balin is like, Durin's day is coming up real quick. And he's like, well, you still have time to get to the Lonely Mountain. So you should do that. And then immediately after this, you see the orcs approaching Azog and telling him that they lost the dwarves. He kills those orcs.
Yeah, because he says something like, oh, you should have just sacrificed with your life or something. And then like stabs him and throws him off the cliff.
Which every time I see it, I'm like, this is why you don't fight for evil, because when you piss them off, they have
like your loyalty doesn't matter to them,
right?
And unless it's about their cause, like he doesn't care about whatever y'all were dealing with. He's like, did you kill them or not? And they're like, no, we didn't. He's like, all right, you're useless to me. Next.
Right. I wonder too, like, what does Azog do in his free time? Like, I'm like,
and that's why I think that's why I wrote, what's the point of him? I was like, what is the point of this man? Because he just wants to like get revenge, which I guess cool. So does Thorin. But like, what is the point of you?
His revenge though is for something that's his fault. Like, he wouldn't have lost his arm if he had not attacked the dwarves. Literally the whole that had nothing to do with him at all. Like, they were trying to reclaim the mountain from the dragon, and then the orcs just showed up and were like, guess what, now we're gonna kill all of the dwarves. And it's like, but why? Like,
like literally why?
I'm sure that there's a history to that that's not included in the movie, probably in like one of the, maybe there was some war between like the orcs and the dwarves, and they were just waiting for them to be vulnerable. But he is very annoying as a character.
Yeah, it just seems like there was just this like, there's always this I want to say interspecies battle. Like they all have some sort of beef with each other.
They do.
Yeah.
Which is why it's such a big deal that they fight
together. Mm-hmm.
at the end of this series and then at the end of Lord of the Rings. Because they're literally like, if we do not fight together, we will all die.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we might as well fight together. And it is very, I think you were the one who said like it's very acts. Like
yeah.
Together. So then that passes, and then Gandalf and Elrond meet up with Galadriel and Saruman. And every time I see Saruman, I'm immediately like, but he's not yet.
I know he's not yet, but I'm really like evil, betrayer, traitor.
Right, Judas.
Right.
So, but I will say, because they like obviously these movies came out after the Lord of the Rings movies, and they already knew that he was going to become evil. I think they did a good job of setting it up where it's believable that he turned evil, because in this whole conversation, he does not recognize. Well, first of all, he discredits Radagast, the wilderness man, because he does too many mushrooms. I'm like, that is a dumb reason to not believe what he says. He says,
so that's what they said about John the Baptist too.
So. Right. He goes, the necromancer is just some man. He's not a real person. That's impossible. It's impossible that somebody is like, I don't know, raising people from the dead or whatever it is that he's saying. And he does not take seriously the coming threat, which in my head, I'm like, you're blind to the seriousness of the evil. So that to me is like, this is where you open the breach for evil to come in. And
that is so sorry. We said that. And I'm like, yo, that's a lot of people. Like a lot of people are like that. Even not even when it comes to just like evil things, but even when it comes to like God, like very much like, no, I don't really believe that. No, that can't be possible. No, like, and they just won't allow themselves to see it. Like they're just like, no, I can't.
Right. I think in America, I think like there are not to get too spiritual, but
right.
principalities over different regions. And I think in America, one of them is unbelief. Because you hear all these crazy stories of like, Latin America and the Caribbean, or like in Africa, like just crazy stuff, like people turn into animals, or like people like
and even when I hear that, like that's stuff that I know is real, like within my culture, even sometimes I'm like, wait, someone turned into an animal, like are we sure? Like but like it's legit.
Because in the United States, I think it's like everything is so logic. If it doesn't fit into this little logic box, and it doesn't make sense. And I think that's why the enemy is like, I cannot show you great evil, because if you see great evil, like somebody trying to eat an animal, or like something crazy happening, you will then believe, okay, well, if this is real, then that
can be real.
Then other things can be real too. And I think that's Saruman's issue. He's like, I don't see this as a problem, and then the problem overtakes him in the later movie. So he annoys me.
That's literally just like the enemy. Like, wow.
Right. And Sauron does not care about him at all. He's just
a vessel. He's literally just a vessel to him. He's like, oh, you're willing to do evil for me? Cool.
Right. Yeah. So, and then another noteworthy person is Cate Blanchett playing Galadriel. I strive to be as graceful as she is when she plays Galadriel. There's a scene in The Lord of the Rings where she comes down the stairs and her shoulders don't move. Like, I'm like, how? Like, she's like, it's like she's walking and you don't see the steps like resonate in the rest of it.
She's just literally gliding.
She glides like down the stairs. And even the way she turns around, she like pivots and she like looks at him, and I'm like, I want to be her. Like, she's so cool. Like, she's so graceful.
And she holds so much power too.
Yes, she does. But she's also like kind. She's very, she can be really intense, and she's like all up in his business, just all up in everybody's mind.
Ooh, would not want that. No, thank you.
No, not at all. Because I'd be like, literally get out of her.
Because she's literally like, she says to Gandalf, not out loud, but like in his brain, like she's like, oh, you know something. And I'm like, yeah, see, if anyone around me was like, oh, you have like a secret, I'd be like, please get away from me right now.
Yeah. So, and I wrote that her acting range is amazing, because that's just a fact. So Gandalf then shows them the sword and is like, this belonged to the Witch King of Angmar, who we saw, the ghost. And Galadriel's like, that's not possible, because that was buried with him. And so it leads us to believe, like, how did he get unburied? Because she said that he was buried in like a tomb so dark that it would never see the light, or something really dramatic like that.
Yeah.
And Sauron is still like, we have no proof. We do not believe it. He's like, Radagast said that. I don't believe it. He's so annoying. So annoying.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the last Hobbit movie yet, but like, does like his character kind of like is set up to be how he was in the first Lord of the Rings movie?
Yeah, because the last one ends with him basically saying he's gonna go, because by the end of the series, they're aware that it's Sauron, that he's the necromancer, and he's trying to come back, and he's like, I'm gonna go investigate into this. And then in Fellowship of the Ring, he has the Palantir, what do you call those, the there's a word, there's like a term we use, the magic,
the crystal ball.
Thank you, the crystal ball. I was like, and I'm like, what is the thing, you know? And he tried to use that to see into Sauron, but Sauron ended up seeing into him or something, and then that's how they send him off to do research on his own, and he comes back evil. So good times. So then they're talking, and Galadriel's like, they're leaving, and Gandalf's like, yes. And she's like, oh, so you knew. So he's like distracting them so that the dwarves can leave. And then as they leave, Gandalf then talks to Galadriel, and I love this scene, like this conversation between them. I don't know, it's just really nice, because she also is one of those people who's kind of like, I believe you, you know.
Yeah. I mean, she can read people's minds, so it's not like they can really lie to her.
Right. No, not at all. She can like see their future, like yeah. And then Gandalf makes this little speech, because she asks him like, why Bilbo? And he says like, because he essentially says like, Bilbo he makes me feel less afraid, thing like that. And then he also says, Saruman believes that it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. I have found it is in the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk, that keeps the darkness at bay, simple acts of kindness and love. And I love that so much.
Yeah. Reminds me of like the fruits of the spirit.
Yeah, and like also the least shall become the greatest. Theme in both series for sure. Yeah. Any thoughts on that whole like elf wizard reunion, the dwarves escaping, anything like that?
No. I think you got it. I think you covered it. But I was just thinking like about I'm not going to try to pronounce her name, Cate Blanchett and Gandalf, and just like you go into like the details of the scene, and I just remember the overall aspect of the scene, basically, which is just like, yeah, they have a conversation and she goes into his brain. And I'm like, that was a great.
That's fair. So then we pan back to the dwarves, and the mountains theme is playing, and it's like bum bum bum, like in the back. It's so great. So you really feel like their adventure, and you see that it's like a montage of them like just literally walking in different places. Yeah, the mountains are in the distance, and they get closer, and then they end up in like a thunder fight between these stone giants. They end up like on one of the stone giants as they're like fighting each other, so they almost die.
Yes, which is such a cool reveal, because you don't realize that they're stone giants, because they're like, oh, what's going on? And then all of a sudden it like separates, and it's like two beings. I was like, whoa, that's so cool.
It is cool. Probably not cool to be
no, absolutely, to be on the giants while it's happening, no.
Right, to watch the giants while it's happening. So that happened. They almost died. They thought that half the company had died, but they ended up being alive. And then Bilbo is like hanging off the side, and they're trying to get him to grab their hand, but he can't reach. So Thorin has to kind of come down and help push him up, and then Thorin almost falls. And then Thorin catches an attitude again and is like, you should never have. Yeah, he's like, you should never have left your home. And I'm like, it's not his fault. At least he held on to the side.
First of all, I wouldn't have been here if y'all didn't come into my house in the first place. Right. But okay.
I think the problem with Thorin for me is that he's like really entitled, because I kept thinking like, Bilbo literally does not owe you anything at all. What have you done for Bilbo? Nothing. No. He came here out of the
interrupt his peace.
Right. basically. So but Bilbo like accepts those things into
Mm-hmm.
himself too. And then I wrote down we don't belong anywhere because one of the dwarves says that to him,
Yeah.
and that is very very sad. So yeah, so then they're they're not in agreement with each other. Bilbo's trying to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very this moment I feel like it's kind of like Jonah and the whale a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
they're inside the mountain because it's crazy outside. So they're inside this mountain, and then all of a sudden when Bilbo's talking to, I think it's Beaver or something like that, the one with like the crazy hair, and that's the one who tells him like we don't belong anywhere, like it's true,
Mm-hmm.
I wish you the best of luck. He goes to leave, his sword is glowing, which means that there are goblins nearby.
Goblins.
And then all of a sudden, that because he was standing up, he's the only person who did not fall into the trap. And all of the thing opens, they all fall, and then he has a choice of like, I could leave this mountain and nobody would know that I was
Mm-hmm.
here right now.
Yep.
But he chooses to go back. In doing so, he fights a goblin and knocks himself out. um
That's what my brain did.
yeah,
It mixed both of them together because you said they
yeah.
fell into the trap. I was like, no, he fell and knocked himself out. No, those are two separate actions that happened.
Yes, no, he did not fall. They fell. They got trapped
Mm-hmm.
by the Goblin King, who is disgusting. And then he falls, knocks himself out.
Mm-hmm.
Then he wakes up to Gollum dragging that same goblin and killing him. And then Gollum sneaks up on him. And then they have like a riddle war.
Yeah, that man love a riddle. Good God.
Right. Well, actually, before that, Gollum drops the ring while he's killing him.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then Bilbo's like, "That's pretty. Let me pick it up," and puts it in his
Mm-hmm.
pocket.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on this whole Gollum Bilbo exchange?
I mean, I think obviously it sets it up
Mm-hmm.
for what's to come.
Right.
Um, it's our introduction to Gollum slash Smeagol. Um, so like we're already aware that he's just very much about the ring, the precious, protecting it, keeping it safe. Because he kills the goblin because he thinks it has the ring or something, or
I
he's
thought he
trying to
killed it
take
to
it
eat
from
it.
him.
No, I think he killed it to eat it.
Oh, that would make sense too. He
Yeah.
he just eats everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then like he loses the ring and stuff, and then like I remember after Bilbo puts it in his pocket, you see Gollum like sailing on like the leaves and stuff, trying to follow him because he notices him. So yeah, I think it's just our introduction to like what's to come. That like he hasn't really he has like the split personality thing going, but it's like when you watch Lord of the Rings movie, you obviously see it gets worse and worse like
Mm-hmm.
as the movies go on, that at some point they're not even separate personalities anymore, they kind of blend
Yeah.
together. So I think it's just like a great intro to Gollum and what his character is like, because he's consistent, like
Mm-hmm.
even when he meets Frodo he's the same way.
Yes.
So he's just a very interesting character because you kind of forget that he's human.
He's like a mix of like he's like a pre-Hobbit, whatever.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the hobbits they're not humans, I guess
Yeah.
technically,
Yeah. They
but
can be.
you know what I mean. Like you forget that he's like a being because he
Yes.
looks so much like
Not like
a
a little
creature.
demon. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like a little creature, like a goblin. So it's like you kind of forget
Right.
that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, Gollum is a very interesting character to me. I don't particularly like him, but he's just very interesting to me.
I hate him. Gollum is my least favorite character in the entire series because I think it's interesting too because Frodo and Bilbo like engage with him in the same way. Well, they engage with
Mhm.
him, period. Like
Yeah.
I feel like they appeal, even though Bilbo doesn't know at this point that he is also like Smeagol.
Hmm.
Bilbo appeals to that side of him because he's like, "Do you want to play a game?" And like, there's like a little excited part of him that's like, "I love games," and then the other one
Hmm.
is like,
Mm.
you know, um,
Yeah. Like, what are you trying to do? Yeah.
yeah. So I almost feel like, and I wonder if that's because there's like a part of him, like I said, he's like adjacent to a hobbit, that maybe there's like a part of them that sees themselves in him.
Hmm.
But I think it's really interesting that they engage with him at all and give him a
Yeah.
chance
Yeah.
when I'm like, this thing is crazy.
But in a way, like Gollum kind of puts you in a position where you can't really avoid him.
Yeah.
Because like you can see Bilbo try to walk away and he'll like kind of crawl in front of him and like,
Yeah.
oh no, like where are you going? Like we're talking. And it's like, no, I don't want to interact with you. So he kind of puts you in a position where you're like, okay, like I might as well just like interact with you until I can get out of here.
Right. And he doesn't know how to get out of there too. That's the deal that he makes. Even though I'm like, he's not gonna honor this deal. No, like he's not. He's not gonna honor his deal with Frodo either. In the future,
No,
like you said.
hey, you have something he wants and he's gonna manipulate you until he gets it.
Right. And then he finds out that he has the ring, and then he turns absolutely murderous.
Bonkers.
Yeah. And then there's like the scene where Bilbo trips again, and the ring lands on his finger similar to the way it does with Frodo in Fellowship of the Ring, which I thought was cool. And then he's like, I am invisible. This is cool. And so okay, then we pan back to upstairs.
Yep.
Where Gandalf, where the goblins have captured the dwarves and they're like singing. I think it's interesting that the goblin is singing, but like really off key about how he's gonna kill them. And then Gandalf comes in and it's like a white light. And this is where I thought the scoring was really interesting too, because it was playing that dramatic like goblin music. And then when Gandalf came in, it was the Misty Mountains theme again. And I thought it was interesting that he came in, he killed a bunch of goblins, but then was like, now fight. Like I cleared this way for you to be able to now get up and fight. And I was like, that's a word for me too. It really is. And then it's like the music kind of toggles back and forth, because sometimes it's like when they're like winning, it's like the Misty Mountains theme, and then sometimes it like mixes with the drums, and then sometimes it's the drums, and then it goes back. It's really, I noticed that for the first time this time around, because my mom was like, this music is so inducing.
Shout out to Vivian.
Right. And I was like, oh my God, it's switching based on who's winning. So then they escape. And as they're escaping, Bilbo is invisible and he sees them go by. He realizes, I have another choice. I could literally sneak away. Nobody would know. I could also kill Gollum if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And then he holds the sword to him. And I noticed the music this time around too. When he decides to not kill Gollum, the Shire music plays in the back. So it's almost like he realizes, like, this is not who I am.
Yep.
Like killing this random innocent in quotation being, that's not who I am, and I don't need to do that in this moment. And then it mixes with like this kind of drum music again, because he is the same person, but he's also different. And it kicks him.
He's grown.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on any of what I just said? The goblins, the Gollum of it all, the ring, the staying his hand.
No, I think, like I was saying before, I think it's all just setting up for Lord of the Rings. What's the first one called? Fellowship?
Yep, Fellowship of the Ring.
So it's setting up for that. And someone who's seen Lord of the Rings, it kind of makes you excited, like especially if you've already seen it. Like it's like, oh, then I could watch the Lord of the Rings movies after this and it's all gonna connect. So, and what's also interesting, and I don't know if they even touch on it, but I'm like, Gollum's kind of crazy, so he probably wouldn't even have the mental capacity to think about this. But like, I wonder if he recognized a little bit of Bilbo and Frodo, because it's just like, he obviously didn't say like his last name or anything. Oh, well, he does, doesn't he?
He does, I think.
So I'm like, I wonder if like a part of him was like, oh, I knew a Baggins once. Like I interacted with one once. And I didn't like him very much. So let me see what I can do with this one. So
that's true, like a revenge. I wonder when I inevitably read the books, I'll let you know if it comes up. The one last thing I wanted to mention about the scene is a quote that I had written down, because the Goblin King is like taunting them for a long. Villains always do this. It's like, just kill them. Why are you giving this?
Why do we have a monologue? Please.
I don't know. And
get to the point.
he's talking to Thorin, and he's like, well, you don't have a mountain and you're not a king, which makes you nobody, really. And I was like, that's so mean. Right. No, he's right. He's like adjacent to right, where it's like the facts that he's saying are true, but like that's not what makes you a person.
Right. Yeah.
And it just got me thinking about like, one, anxiety, and two, like the enemy and like what he'll do. He'll be like, well, you're nobody because you don't have the things that you used to have.
Yeah.
When God is like, but what's in your hand, and like who's around you? So
you have what you need.
Yeah, and then the way the Goblin King dies is disgusting, and I hate that scene. But anyway, now they're outside, they're safe. Thorin catches an attitude again, and he's like, Bilbo.
Which I'm not understanding, because you're getting saved consistently by either Gandalf or Bilbo, and you're upset every time. Maybe he's upset because he can't do it himself.
Probably.
Maybe that's what it is, because he's like, I couldn't do it and I needed someone else to help me.
That's probably it. Like, it's projection of like, you should never have come. You're not who you think you are. Like, you can't do this, you know? So that's true. So he's like, Bilbo abandoned us, and then Bilbo takes off the ring and he's like, I'm right here. Actually. And I like this scene because it's like he is gaining his confidence. Like, he doesn't fully have that confidence yet, but he's able to stand up to Thorin a little bit. And he's like, I know you don't like me, but I told you guys I would come, and I have a home and you don't. And that's why I want to help you. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. And I feel like Thorin has at least a little bit of decency to look somewhat embarrassed when Bilbo appears after he takes off the ring. But I'm like, Thorin, if you keep doing this, I can't. I
just can't support your cause, you know? Like, right. I'm trying to, but you're making it really hard.
You are making it really hard. So then, of course, they can't have peace for more than 2 moments because wargs attack them and they hide in a tree. And then, like, Azog appears from afar. And this is, like, one of the final scenes of the movie. Yeah. And I think Gandalf says, like, out of the frying pan and into the fire or something, because they literally just escaped the Goblin King, and now all of a sudden Thorin's like old rival appears. So at first they're just like driven into it. There are like 2 trees on a mountainside. They're driven into one. They knock down one of the trees, so they jump to the other tree. And then this tree starts to go down too. So they're like, we're gonna die. This is not good. Yeah. And in my head, I was like, why can't Gandalf fly? Like, he has magic. Like, why can't he be like Doctor Strange?
Like,
right,
like a staff or something.
But apparently he cannot fly. So I feel like that's dumb. I think wizards should be able to fly. But anyway,
at least, you know, be able to like transport themselves to places.
Yeah, but no. But then he inspires them to fight back because he starts like setting things on fire and throwing them, so they gain their courage. And then this is my favorite scene. You know this. Thorin like looks across this like blazing field and he sees Azog, and there's this moment where it's like you can see Thorin decide to fight, and Azog's like expression like shifts for a second. He's like, oh, I think in his head he's probably like, this guy cut off my arm and almost killed me.
It's like it reminded him of like who Thorin is. Like he was like, oh, wait a minute.
Right. And it reminds Thorin of who he is too. Like, I almost eat this guy before. I'm not supposed to be the one scared of him. He should be scared of me.
Yep.
And he jumps off the tree and he runs toward Azog. I don't know how this man did not die, because he literally was bitten by that warg and thrown like this.
Listen, adrenaline is a really big thing also.
That's true.
Not that, you know, biology even matters in this world, but you know.
It could. And then Azog is such a punk because he like orders one of the other orcs to kill him, and I'm like, he's half dead. What do you think is gonna happen?
Really a punk. Like, he's just, which is a perfect metaphor for like the enemy too. It's just like the enemy talks a lot of smack, likes to make us feel scared or intimidated, you know, but he actually can't do anything on his own. He needs other people to do stuff for him. And he's actually very terrified of us, so
for sure. Well, yeah, once Thorin realizes who he is, like, I think that's when it like changes, because that's like what you're saying, like the enemy wants us to think we are not, because if he can defeat us in our minds, then we're defeated like in general, because we'll defeat ourselves. We'll like self-sabotage.
As long as we stay defeated and doubtful and like thinking we have no power, he's like, oh, I'm chilling, I'm fine, I don't need to do anything to you. Right,
exactly. So then the orc is like, I'm gonna kill Thorin, but then Bilbo comes out of nowhere with his little sword and kills the orc, and I'm like, period. But then he faces off with Azog, and he's like, okay, so now I'm gonna die. That was a great last hurrah.
Last hurrah, you know, this is how it's all gonna end. Great adventure though.
Right. But then all the dwarves like gain their courage too and run into the battle and start fighting off the orcs. And then at last the eagles come in and you can like hear them before they get there because it's like the eagle music plays and you're like, oh, thank God. Um, and they are kind of like, I've looked this up before. They kind of have like, they're not really ruled by anybody. So they kind of just show up
Wow.
when they want to.
Mhm.
And in my head, I feel like they showed up because of the sacrifice that both Bilbo and Thorin were willing to make for
Mhm.
their kin. Well, for Thorin's kin. Um, so then the eagles take them away. Azog is very displeased by this. And then they land on the mountain, and then Thorin has that whole speech where he's like, I distrusted you, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, is this man about to roast again? But then he's like, I've never been so wrong in all my life.
Yeah. And then
And
he
Bill,
hugs
I know he hugs him. I'm like, and Bilbo says, like, I would have doubted in me too. And like, that's so relatable.
Mhm.
And then they see the lonely mountain in the distance. It's like, oh, look where the eagles placed us. Like, now we can see where we're going. And I don't know
Mhm.
which one of them says this, but one of them is like, I do believe the worst is behind us. And then it goes into the mountain, and you see like the dragon's eye open
Mhm.
in the gold, and then it ends. So, what are your thoughts on that last like 30 minutes? Like,
Whenever I think about the eagles coming in, I think of that verse that says, like, and they'll mount up
mm-hmm,
like wings of the eagle, or mount up on wings like the eagles, which is like, it's just that verse to life. Basically, like they just swooped in and just carried them out of there. So I always think that is a really cool moment. Um, and like, I just, Thorin finally stopped being annoying. Finally just put his pride aside.
mm-hmm,
And was just like, actually, I'm actually really grateful for you
mm-hmm.
and glad that you came, despite,
Yeah.
my doubts before. What I think shows Thorin's growth as a leader
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like that you can actually be grateful for the people that are surrounding you instead of feeling like you don't really need them, or like, they're just there to support your cause, but like, no, they genuinely are there because they care about you, not just your cause or what you're fighting for, but like they care about you. And like, I think a good leader shows like gratitude and compassion towards those who like follow them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was like a good character development moment.
Yeah. And what Thorin valued in the dwarves who came, like that whole line in the beginning says, for when I called, they answered.
Mhm.
I think he realized like Bilbo also fits into that
Yeah.
because he's willing to like sacrifice his life or like risk his life to save me, to save all of us, and
Yeah.
to do once again something that has nothing to do with him and will
Mhm.
not change his life at all. So I
Because
think,
he gets to go back to the Shire,
right,
if he survives, he gets to go back home.
right, which spoiler, he does. We know that that is the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
But and I think Bilbo's character development and character growth
Mhm.
is really evident as well, just in him like building that confidence in himself. And like even to go back to that one scene where he's like, you know what, Thorin, yeah, you're right. Like I am kind of like, a homebody and I like my
Yeah.
work, but like I'm gonna do what I can. So you guys need help and I'm gonna help you, whether you like it or not. I'm here. I'm not leaving.
Yeah. He's come too far. He can't go back now.
He's like, a troll almost killed me, so now I'm not leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're stuck. You're stuck. Uh,
One thing that I wrote down on my notes, which was like at the beginning when, Bilbo was writing like The
mhm,
Hobbit. Um, and that I wrote like, I want to write a story that inspires my children to dream and go on adventures.
mm,
Or even just like live a life that
yeah.
inspires my kids to like go out and like do amazing things. Cause like it's, again, there's nothing wrong with like the comfort zone and like having your established life. But I think like, there are moments where like God does want us to venture out and just do
Mhm,
that new thing or take that risk. Because it doesn't just affect us, it affects the next generation. Because when we look at Frodo, like because of Bilbo's risk and like willing to take that adventure, it sets up for Frodo's life. Not that it was necessarily a great thing for him because the ring basically ruined his life. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah. And that's what I kind of, my overall thing with like the cost of like taking risks and stuff, and like, you know, being open to the new or open to change is like what I kind of pulled overall from this movie.
Yeah, no, that's really good because I think like the most powerful, most interesting, most important stories are often one that involve like a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty. Even if we think about like Bible stories, if you think about it like in the middle of the story or in the beginning of the story, and you imagine yourself in it,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of situations where I feel like a lot of those people could have been like, "I'm good, actually, I'm not doing that."
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
many
doing
people in
that.
the Bible could have been
Yeah,
like, actually, I'm all set. I'm good. Find
that's
someone else.
crazy. Yeah,
Like
I'm not
Moses.
doing that.
Moses genuinely was like, no, find someone else.
Mhm.
Sorry. He was Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah, and Moses ended up still doing what
Mm-hmm.
needed to be done. I mean, there were some bumps along the way because of
Absolutely.
his disobedience, and
Mhm.
like God had to send Aaron to help him
Yeah.
and all this stuff, and then Aaron
Mm-hmm.
ended up being like a pain in the butt, like in the
Yep.
wilderness, but whatever. Um,
Humans, you know.
right, I digress. But yeah, and then if you think about it, like that's in obviously aside from Jesus in like the New Testament, in the Old Testament, that story is like the biggest, most dramatic, most intense story. And it's
Mhm.
crazy. Like if you think about it, about being someone who was like banished from Egypt because you killed
Yep.
somebody, and then
Yep.
you come back in and be like, you know, the slaves that you used to do everything, can you let them go? I was thinking that you should let them go because
Yeah.
my God told me. And have Pharaoh be like, you who I called brother. Like, no. So,
Like, and even just thinking about it from like kind of like a systemic point, like
mhm,
this is somebody coming to a full government and being
yes.
like, yeah, I want you to totally dismantle your entire source of power and
Mhm,
income and
mhm,
livelihood
right.
because a God that you don't even believe exists told me to tell you that.
That's correct. I can see how Pharaoh would be like,
Like, what?
you're dumb. Like, you are just dumb.
Because
Um,
Pharaoh could have easily been like, yeah, just take him to the prison, like, just kill him right here.
yeah. I have a theory that part of the reason Pharaoh didn't is because they are like brothers in a way.
Mm. Yeah.
And I feel
They
like
grew up together in some aspect, yeah.
there was maybe some jealousy between about Moses because he now showed up with like his real brother. Oh,
Mhm.
this is who you are now. That's nice.
Yeah.
Um, so that's an interesting. Yeah, so I do think there's a lot of resemblance between
Yeah.
Bilbo and Moses for sure. Bilbo and Jonah, I think.
Mhm.
Bilbo and David, like early David.
Mhm.
So, which I think like Tolkien does a good job of. No character is like 100% like a Bible person. Like
Yeah.
they're all like, okay, I see a little bit of like Paul in this character, but he's
Mhm.
not like entirely Paul because of
Yeah.
whatever. Um, and I feel like that's relatable because none of us are like 100% one person. We have like different
Yeah.
aspects. So, yeah, is there anything you wanted to add? We've reached the end of my million plot points.
I think it was great. I'm glad that you had the details because I thoroughly would have just talked about all the themes and
Mhm.
that would have been the conversation on my end. But I think it was great. I think when we do the second one, I'm probably gonna write more details and probably watch it earlier in the day rather than trying to watch it at 8:30 at night, knowing that I go to bed at 11 or 10:30.
Because they are long. They are
Yeah, they're
long.
like 3 hours long. So if you are going to watch, just plan accordingly. Unless you are someone that can stay up. I cannot. So, but yeah, I mean to add, I think it's a great start to this series. I'm really excited. Can't wait till we get to like the Lord of the Rings movies
I know,
because
me too.
I'm definitely going to be like real hype about those.
Mhm.
Um yeah, I'm actually just excited about this whole fantasy series that we're doing. So,
Me too. This is like where my heart is. Someone someone once told me they were like, "Did you know that like fantasy was invented in Latin America?" like that series? And I was like, no, but that makes a lot of
Oh, that's
sense.
so
Like,
cool.
yeah, she was like, so basically, like that's like in your blood. Like that's why you're so interested in fantasy. And I was like,
Wow.
that's actually really cool. So um yeah, but I'm really excited as well. Let us know in the comments your thoughts. If you're going to disagree with us, please do it politely and respectfully.
Yeah, don't be an incel. Thank you very much.
I will delete your comments if you're going to be rude.
Yeah.
So just don't, please save us both the time of me having to
Yeah.
rude. But we can definitely disagree respectfully.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. And let us know if there are any like honestly books or movies related to anything that you think would be interesting for us to read or talk about. Did you have something to say?
Or if like I was gonna say, or if anyone like thinks of things that maybe we didn't even mention
Yeah,
or talk about that they picked up on, I
yeah.
think that would be really cool just to kind of have like a discussion in the comments and stuff.
I'm sure that there is because every time I watch, like I feel like I notice something
Mm-hmm.
different. Yeah, so I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the show to come out at the end of this year. We might have to do something on that as well. Support it. But yeah, this has been AM and the PM, both podcast and YouTube.
Yes.
We
Oh
are
my gosh, this is our
hyping
first
it.
YouTube
I know,
video.
yay! So exciting. So thank you guys for watching or listening, whatever platform you find yourself on, and we will see you for the Desolation of Smaug. Bye, everybody.
Bye.